I mean, I mentioned the physical evidence. That's a big part. I use an analogy about UFO sightings, which I think is quite helpful in designated areas. But sometimes things can go wrong. And what if it splashes down in another part of the world? Apparently, and I'm doing this from memory, so I may get this.
You can pull it up, Alessi.
Yeah, it's out there on the net. But apparently it translates to continuous exploration for planetary advance, eyes of our eyes, origin year 8100. And there then follow a series of latitudinal and longitudinal coordinates.
Wait a second.
Yeah, I know.
Is this like a future human implication?
Yes, it is.
Oh my God.
Those latitudinal and longitudinal coordinates apparently correlate with some of the most mysterious sacred sites on the face of the planet, including the Great Pyramid at Giza, Sedona, the Nazca Lines, and so forth. And a mysterious lost continent from Celtic legend called High Brazil. It's bizarre. Myself, if this is genuine, I think it's kind of too good to be true, because it's like almost like a buzzword bingo of your New Age bucket list.
Yes, it is.
If this is real, as opposed to something that Jim, and I don't mean made up, but
Well, I don't like that a TV production company is the one who like oversaw this and brought in the computer guy.
Well, they didn't know. I do enough TV to know that normally they don't like surprises. So they kind of had to scramble around for this, and this was all a bit last minute. So I don't, and they weren't so much pulling the strings. They were just like, is this something or is this nothing?
Did they show his full zeros and ones code?
Oh,
like,
yes.
Is that public info now, so we can pull that up?
Yes.
So technically, the expertise of among the public, of people who do translations like this, could check that work.
Oh, yeah. I mean, nowadays it's much easier. I mean, there are literally, if you manually now put those ones and zeros in the correct order, there are sites that will translate binary to English and vice versa.
And it translates
like a sort of Google Translate or Bing Translate. There's a equivalent for binary. So I don't think there's much dispute that that's what it translates as.
Wow.
But my point is, this is too good to be true. And if this is a message from, ostensibly, I guess, because it says origin year 8100, the implication would be time travelers from the future.
Multiverse.
But I don't know. Grandfather paradox.
A lot of things.
Yeah,
it could be a lot of things, yes.
I think if this is real, that this is just like an attention getter, and that the real message somehow is hidden deeper. And,
what do you mean by that?
Well, it gets our attention because everyone goes, "Ooh, Great Pyramids, Sedona,
sexy."
But if there's a real and important message from the future, or maybe not from the future, maybe from extraterrestrials, maybe it's hidden somewhere else in the message. Now, look, I'm not a cryptographer, but I do know that there are, ways of almost like presenting a solution that looks like a solution, but really it isn't. The real answer is much deeper in. Maybe I'm not describing that very well.
No, that's perfect. I understand exactly what you mean.
Right. You'd need to talk to a cryptographer about this, or a symbologist, or both, or a mathematician. Anyway, look, it's one of the most controversial aspects of the case. But if you take it out of the case, you've still got a case. I mean, I mentioned the physical evidence. That's a big part of it.
Now, I don't know what you're allowed to talk about and what you're not. So if I bring up things that you can't talk about, just say you can't, and we'll move on. But
absolutely. I mean, any public interview I do can only be at an unclassified level.
Sure.
Otherwise, I'll be breaking the law.
Sure. So, basic question. You said you looked at like the cold case file of it, which means you're still looking at it.
Right, I did the cold case review. So I had the original 1980 file.
So did they have a conclusion on there?
No, they did not.
They didn't.
No. It was
Open-ended.
unknown. So I use an analogy about UFO sightings, which I think is quite helpful, that I say to myself. I say it's kind of like a crime file. Cops will investigate all the crimes, and hopefully they will have a good solving rate, and those cases can then be closed. Any case where a cop opens an investigation but doesn't actually solve the case, technically, even if there comes a time when you stop putting resources on it because you've just done everything that you can do, you've interviewed all the witnesses, you've done all the forensics you can do, technically, that case is still an open case because it's unsolved. I mean, to give an extreme example, the Jack the Ripper murders are technically an open case. Now, we know as a degree of intellectual certainty that the perpetrator is dead, of course, because the murders were committed in 1888. So clearly,
a real old son of a bitch if you're still alive.
So nobody is obviously going to try and investigate that case with a view of bringing anyone to justice because it's too late. They may, however, as a matter of historical interest and curiosity, occasionally pull out that file and do something with it. So UFO investigations are very much like police investigations. Sure. At the end of the day, you solve most of them. And I mentioned we got 200 or 300 cases each year. And I do my investigations.
Oh, I misunderstood you for a second. Keep going.
No, so I interview the witness. I analyze any photos or videos that we have. I cross-reference with flight paths, with weather balloon launches, with astronomical data. And each of my cases at the end, it's like this was almost certainly a military exercise where where flares were dropped.
But not for this one.
Not for this one. So an unsolved UFO case is like an unsolved crime case. It sits there kind of, even if it gathers dust, but technically unsolved open case. Rendlesham was an unsolved case.
All right, so I'm going to cover your camera real fast. And I want you to blink twice if you actually do know what happened.
I'm not playing that game, but no, honestly, hand on heart.
He's got a good poker face.
Hand on heart, we did not have a definitive explanation. What we need, the way I tell it is this: I can tell you what it wasn't, but I can't tell you what it was.
All right, well, let's do that.
I mean, not can't, as in I know
understand.
and don't. I literally do not know, and I'm not convinced that anyone does have an explanation. But look, we went through very carefully all the possibilities. Could this be some sort of elaborate practical joke that got out of hand? I mean, there is a culture of practical jokes in the military.
That'd be a hell of a practical
joke. It would
joke.
be. But a couple of people have retrospectively claimed that they played that practical joke. I think they are either mistaken or they're just outright lying. And
having some sort of drone-ish technology at that size of a craft in 1980. Come on.
Sure. There's one guy who says that he drove his police car into the forest and then put the lights on without the siren. Well, that kind of doesn't really make any sense. And there's no evidence that even happened. The guy may simply be trying to write himself into the story. Even if it did happen, there's no evidence that it kind of played any role in this. There's another guy who said that they had, one of the things that they had at the base was they had a unit called the, I can't remember what it was, but if one of the Apollo capsules came down in an unanticipated area. Like obviously for an Apollo mission, you have your splashdowns in designated areas, but sometimes things can go wrong. And what if it splashes down in another part of the world? You have to have a unit that would be able to go at immediate notice and fish them out. So there was a unit there that had a dummy Apollo capsule. So one of the theories was, could that have been... I know it's
noiseless,
kind of,
though.
I know. That's why this doesn't make sense. That's why it doesn't make sense. So, but somebody said, is it possible that this could have been lowered under a helicopter, dropped in the clearing? Yeah, again, it's
with the invisible strings.
Yeah, I
and
know.
shit. Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. But in a thorough investigation, you have to. If somebody says we did this prank, even if it's years afterwards, you have to say,
yeah, you got to look at it.
Is that possible?
Yes.
Could it be?
Yeah, you have to look into it.
Yeah.
Sure.
And there's another theory that British special forces played a prank on their American colleagues and snuck into the facility. And it's all friend of a friend stuff when it comes
messy.
to this. But you have to consider it. So we looked at all that, and